Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now let's begin. Elaine Porter sat very still at the end of the long dining table, her hands folded neatly on her lap like someone who had trained herself not to fidget. She was 32, married to Daniel Porter for 4 years, and tonight was the annual Christmas gathering at his parents' grand house in the hills. Everyone around her laughed, loud, easy, careless laughter that rolled like a wave across the expensive dining room. But none of them laughed with her. It was the kind of laughter that made a person feel like a joke had been told long before she showed up in the world. Lydia Porter, Daniel's mother, held up a bright red gift box with glitter ribbons and shook it in her manicured hand before opening it theatrically. Inside was nothing. Absolutely nothing. "Oh, dear," Lydia chirped, her smile crisp as winter ice. "Looks like we forgot someone. We only had time for gifts for the important people." The room roared. Elaine felt heat crawl up her neck, but she kept her posture straight. That had become her quiet skill, remaining composed while being made small. Across the table, Daniel stared into his champagne flute as though it contained the courage he needed but never found. He did not say her name. He did not touch her hand. He did not even pretend to be surprised. And somehow, that silence cut deeper than Lydia's words. Elaine gave a practiced, polite smile, the kind women wear like armor. Inside, however, something that had been soft for too long sharpened into a blade. Because this night wasn't simply rude. It felt planned. And she suddenly understood she had never been seen as family, only as an accessory to the son they adored. Around the table, the signs of wealth glittered like a showroom. Cassandra, Daniel's sister, squealed as she unwrapped a luxury perfume set and hugged Lydia as though she had been given diamonds. Theodore Porter, Daniel's father, lifted his wrist high so everyone could admire the heavy golden watch strapped around it, spinning it slowly so the light caught the engraving. Even the cousins had piles of boxes, electronics, expensive wallets, designer coats. Elaine, meanwhile, sat in front of an empty space where a gift should have been. No box, no tag, not even a card. Laughter still floated through the room in bursts. Someone clapped when another package was opened. Someone joked about spoiling themselves next year. But no eyes drifted toward Elaine to include her. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "Just smile. You know how they are." His voice was thin, almost apologetic, but not brave. Elaine gave a soft laugh, though she felt something dark thrum beneath her ribs. Lydia pressed a hand on Elaine's shoulder and said, "You understand, darling? Gifts are for those who contribute meaningfully to the family." Elaine looked up calmly. "Of course," she replied, her tone glass smooth. But inside, she replayed every slight she had swallowed. The forgotten birthday dinner, the missing seat tag at Thanksgiving, the constant reminders from Lydia that she married upward and should be grateful. Cassandra once joked loudly, "At least Elaine has a job to keep her busy," and everyone laughed as though hard work was a flaw. They never asked what she did. Consultants, in their minds, sat at small desks and shuffled small papers. They assumed she was harmless. They assumed she was temporary. But Elaine wasn't empty-handed this year. Not even close. There was something she had prepared, quietly, deliberately. Elaine took a slow sip of her sparkling wine, letting the bubbles sting the inside of her mouth until her pulse settled. She scanned the room again, and she noticed something she'd never allowed herself to admit. Every one of them was comfortable making her invisible. They didn't hate her. They simply saw no reason to acknowledge her existence beyond formality. Lydia leaned close to Theodore, whispering with a smug little grin, and Cassandra laughed too loudly at something unremarkable. Daniel said nothing. He always said nothing. "Just ignore it," he repeated softly. "It's tradition. They tease everyone." Elaine turned her head and met his eyes. "Do they?" she asked, and Daniel faltered. Because they didn't tease everyone. They only teased her. And now, finally, Daniel knew she knew it too. But Elaine didn't let her expression break. For months, she had anticipated this very moment, not the empty box, perhaps, but the day Lydia pushed too far. Weeks earlier, Elaine had noticed irregularities when Daniel mentioned vague family business dealings. Tax filings that didn't align. Money shifting silently between accounts. Shell corporations in 3 states, including some she recognized from consulting cases her firm had flagged in the past. Strange patterns, she'd murmured at the office. Her team had looked at her with interest. Do you want us to pull on the thread? Her colleague Miles asked. Elaine paused, then said yes. Quietly, officially, legally, not out of vengeance, but out of responsibility and maybe a little survival. Her family-in-law believed she was irrelevant, and people who believe you are irrelevant never hide their secrets carefully. 2 weeks before the Christmas party, Elaine sat in her office reviewing a digital folder full of forensic accounting reports. It listed dozens of transfers, tiny ones, large ones, suspicious ones, all connected to the Porter family businesses. At first she wondered if there had been sloppy bookkeeping. Then she saw emails authorizing expenses with fake signatures, invoices sent from companies that didn't exist, and charitable deductions routed into private spending. Her firm didn't know she was related to the family involved, and she let it stay that way. This is enough to trigger a flag, Miles told her, leaning over her screen. Do we escalate? Elaine hesitated only a moment before saying, yes, it's time. The next few days moved quietly and professionally. Requests were filed. Internal compliance teams opened inquiries. Red flags were forwarded upstairs. Elaine felt both sick and steady. She didn't want to destroy a family, but she couldn't sit silently while crimes hid under holiday centerpieces. And meanwhile, Lydia continued sending group messages, bragging about luxury furniture deliveries and private chef tasting menus, while Cassandra posted photos from exclusive resorts captioned Family First. Elaine scrolled past those updates with a calm heart. They have no idea, she whispered to herself. On the morning of the dinner, Miles texted 3 simple words. We are ready. Elaine didn't reply. She only set her phone down and dressed for the party. She chose a quiet navy blue dress, modest and ordinary, because she didn't want attention, not yet. She wanted them to underestimate her one last time. At the dinner table, Lydia eventually stood to speak again, tapping her champagne glass with a silver fork. Before we finish, she announced, projecting her voice like a woman leading a parade, I want to say how proud I am of this family. Every person here has earned their place, every one of them. Her gaze slid deliberately toward Elaine and stayed there for 2 heartbeats. Except, perhaps, those who benefit without contributing. The room fell silent, shocked and curious, like a crowd waiting for a fight. Daniel straightened, but didn't rise. Cassandra hid a smirk behind her glass. Elaine waited, breathing evenly. Then she said, Is that directed at me? Lydia laughed, too sweetly, like sugar dissolving in boiling water. Oh, darling, if it bothers you, maybe it applies. That was the moment something inside Elaine unlocked fully. She placed her napkin on the table and pushed her chair back, gently. Excuse me, she said, and left the room. Inside the marble-tiled bathroom, she stared at her reflection and watched her expression transform into something she had never seen before. Calm, powerful certainty. She checked her phone. Another message had arrived. Documents uploaded. Screens ready. Elaine closed her eyes for one slow breath. It was time. She returned to the table quietly and sat, unnoticed at first. But when Theodore lifted his glass to toast the success of our family empire, Elaine rose and said, clear as a bell, Before we toast, I think there is something we should all look at. Chairs creaked. Heads turned. Lydia's face stiffened like plaster. Elaine reached for the television remote and tapped a button. The screen lit up. Folder names appeared. Numbers. Transfers. Receipts. Emails. A collective gasp rippled through the room like a cold wind. And no one laughed. Chaos did not explode immediately. Shock had its own quiet rules. For a full 3 seconds, no one spoke. The only sound in the room came from the television as documents rolled across the screen. Transaction logs, payment approvals, wire transfers, expense summaries, each bearing the Porter Company crest. Then voices rose all at once, tangled like a dozen radios, tuned to different stations. Cassandra stumbled to her feet, eyes wide. "Turn that off." "That's private!" she shrieked, but she didn't get closer. Theodore, suddenly pale, tried to stand with dignity and failed, gripping the back of a chair to steady himself. Lydia stared at Elaine with a smile so stiff it looked painful. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her attempt at control. Elaine clasped her hands in front of her and said evenly, "It's your financial record for the last 3 years. These transfers lead to shell companies. The shell companies route money back here. Some of them you claimed as charitable expenses." Cassandra sputtered. "You don't know what you're talking about." Elaine turned to her, voice gentle. "I do. I set up some of the accounts. You asked Daniel to sign papers without reading them. I read them." Daniel finally stood, trembling. "Elaine, what did you do?" Elaine exhaled, slow and steady. "Something you should have done a long time ago." Shock rippled through him. Not anger at first, but disbelief that the woman he had dismissed as quiet had been carrying a secret sharper than a knife. Lydia slammed her glass onto the table. "You think you're ruining us?" she hissed. "You won't survive without this family." Elaine shook her head. "I'm not trying to survive you," she replied softly. "I'm stepping away from you." And for the first time, everyone in the room saw her. Not a tolerated outsider, not a quiet wife, but the storm they never expected. The noise intensified until it sounded like a courtroom uproar. Everyone accusing someone else, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, wine sloshing, panic blooming. But Elaine remained still, standing like a center pole holding up a collapsing tent. The files on the screen kept flipping automatically, each page a nail driven into the golden Porter image. Cassandra pointed at Elaine with a shaking hand. "She's lying. Daniel, do something." Daniel didn't move. Lydia grabbed his arm. "Speak," she hissed. He swallowed hard and whispered, "Mom, I think you should stop talking." Lydia whipped toward him as though slapped. "Excuse me." Daniel finally looked at Elaine, really looked, and his mouth worked silently before words formed. "How long have you known?" Elaine answered calmly, "Long enough to know this wasn't an accident." Theodore's voice boomed suddenly. "This is a misunderstanding, a clerical error." Elaine raised an eyebrow. 117 clerical errors. Miles' voice echoed faintly through the speaker. The TV displayed a time-stamped message from the compliance board. Investigation initiated. Cassandra gasped. Theodore sank into his chair. Lydia's mask cracked, fear leaking through. "You can't. You don't. Do you have any idea what you've done?" she stammered. Elaine nodded. "I cleaned up someone else's mess." Cassandra reached for her phone. "We're calling our attorney." Elaine tilted her head slightly. "You might want to call an accountant first." Someone laughed, short, stunned, nervous. It took a moment before Elaine realized it was Daniel. He wasn't laughing because it was funny. He was laughing because denial was no longer possible. The room that used to feel like a throne hall now felt like a sinking ship. And for once, Elaine wasn't the one drowning. Elaine didn't wait for the next wave of shouting. She set the remote down, picked up the small clutch purse she'd carried all night, and gently pushed her chair in, like a polite guest leaving a pleasant dinner. Lydia rushed forward, grabbing her wrist. "You can't walk out," she snapped. Elaine turned slowly, meeting her mother-in-law's eyes with a calm that startled everyone. "Lydia!" she said softly. For 4 years you made it clear that I didn't belong. Tonight, you made sure everyone saw it. Now I'm simply agreeing with you. Lydia's grip tightened. You will destroy this family. Elaine took a step back, freeing her arm. I didn't destroy anything, she answered. I exposed what was already broken. Cassandra blocked the doorway, eyes blazing. What do you want? Money? A public apology. Elaine actually smiled, small, tired, genuine. No, I want peace. Cassandra blinked, confused. You're bluffing, she whispered. Elaine walked past her without touching her. The audit has already begun. I couldn't stop it now if I tried. She paused beside Daniel. He looked up at her, eyes glassy with betrayal and something else. Understanding? Regret? Fear? Why didn't you tell me? He croaked. Elaine sighed. Because you never wanted to hear anything that made you uncomfortable. And I was done shrinking my life to protect yours. Theodore shouted something behind them about legacy, loyalty, betrayal, but Elaine no longer listened. She walked out into the cold night air, her heels clicking softly on the stone steps. For the first time in years, her body felt light, like she had finally stopped holding her breath. She slid into her car. Her hand shook, relief, not fear. Then she drove away, leaving the shouts behind like distant thunder. Elaine spent the night in a quiet hotel near the coast, a place where no one knew her name, where the only sounds were wind and distant ocean. She opened her laptop, reviewed messages, and then closed it again. Her part was done. The company's compliance department, government auditors, and inevitably the authorities would handle the rest. She wrapped herself in the hotel robe, made tea, and sat by the window, watching the sky turn from black to blue. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with Daniel's calls, then messages, then his mother's furious texts, then Cassandra's threats disguised as apologies, and finally silence. At 8 a.m., a notification flashed across her screen. Account freeze confirmed. Status: temporary pending investigation. Elaine exhaled, not smugly, not gleefully, just with a quiet, exhausted sense of justice. By noon there were 3 news alerts. Nothing sensational, just small financial notices, but enough to start a ripple. People who loved the Porters when it benefited them began stepping away. Elaine returned home to find Daniel waiting on the porch, his suitcase at his feet. He looked lost, a man suddenly without the safety net he believed was woven beneath him forever. I'm going to stay with my friend for a while, he said quietly. Elaine nodded. Take what you need. He paused. I never knew you felt this alone. Elaine met his eyes gently. You didn't ask. He swallowed. Do you hate them? She shook her head. No, I'm done with them. Daniel nodded slowly, as though learning a language too late to be fluent. When he left, the silence that remained was not heavy. It was clean. The weeks that followed unfolded like a slow avalanche. The Porter business empire didn't collapse overnight. It unraveled thread by thread. Investors pulled out. Silent partners withdrew. Auditors demanded records Lydia, and Theodore could no longer hide behind lawyers or charm. Cassandra tried to salvage her lifestyle, posting optimistic photos online, but before long her followers noticed the cracks. No travel, no fancy dinners, no celebratory captions. Lydia tried to host small gatherings, but the invites were ignored by people suddenly too busy to associate with scandal. Elaine watched all of it from a distance she'd earned. She returned to work with focus sharper than ever, joined by colleagues who understood exactly what she had done and why. One afternoon, a package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a velvet jewelry box, the same style Lydia used for all her Christmas gifts. Elaine opened it. It was empty. She laughed, not bitterly, not mockingly, but with a strange, relieved clarity. Of course, she whispered. Lydia had mailed her the empty box. She was denied. Except now it meant nothing. Elaine placed the box on a shelf, not as a wound, but as a reminder of who she had stopped being. On New Year's Eve, She poured herself a glass of champagne, raised it to the quiet room, and whispered, to boundaries, to courage, to not disappearing just to make others feel tall. Fireworks burst outside her window, and for the first time in years, she felt entirely, fiercely free. Whatever came next, new love, new life, or simply peace, she would enter it with her spine unbent, her voice steady, and the knowledge that she had saved herself. The empty gift had been her beginning, not her loss. In the new year, Elaine settled into a life she barely recognized at first. Quiet mornings, soft music in the background, a kitchen that felt like her own instead of borrowed space. She woke without dread, without rehearsing polite words she would need to survive a family dinner, without weighing every sentence to avoid offending people who never cared. She began volunteering at the local financial literacy center on weekends, teaching women how to understand budgets, bank accounts, and contracts, the kinds of knowledge that could not only protect them, but free them. "You're really good at explaining this," a young mother told her one day as she scribbled down notes. Elaine smiled, genuinely, not out of habit. "I just want you to know what I wish I knew sooner," she replied. Meanwhile, the Porter family's world continued shrinking. Lydia attempted to regain control by rewriting the narrative, telling friends they had been betrayed, claiming innocence to anyone who would listen. But reputations crumble fastest when pride refuses accountability. Cassandra tried applying for jobs and discovered resumes built on family prestige don't impress people outside that bubble. Theodore spent long days with lawyers and long nights calculating numbers that no longer added up. Only Daniel reached out again, not asking for forgiveness or rescue, but for closure. They met in a modest cafe near the office where Elaine now spent most of her days. Daniel looked older, like months had passed in hours. "I'm getting a place of my own," he said, fingers tracing the edge of his cup. "I want to start over." Elaine nodded, her voice gentle. "You should." He hesitated. "I hope you're happy." Elaine looked out the window at a world suddenly bigger than the Porter dining room ever allowed her to imagine. "I am," she answered. "And I hope you learn to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable." Spring arrived slowly, first in shy green leaves, then in afternoons warm enough to walk without a coat. Elaine had reclaimed her life piece by piece, not rushed or desperate, but with purpose. One Saturday morning, she visited a small farmer's market near the waterfront. She bought fresh bread, ripe berries, and flowers for her living room. Simple things that felt like luxuries only because she could finally enjoy them without being judged or measured. At one stall, she ran into an older woman she had taught at the financial center, who hugged her warmly and said, "You helped me refinance my house. I thought I would lose it." Elaine felt her throat tighten, but she smiled and said, "Only, you did the hard work. I just showed you the door." Later, she walked along the pier, the wind lifting her hair, and realized something powerful. She had stopped thinking about Lydia's voice, Cassandra's judgment, or the endless battle to belong. She belonged to herself, and that was enough. That evening, she lit a candle at home, poured tea instead of champagne, and opened her laptop to draft a proposal for a nonprofit she planned to start. One that protected small investors and held wealthy families accountable when they tried to bend rules others were required to follow. It felt like the natural next step, not revenge, but responsibility. As she typed, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was short, "Thank you," from someone you saved without even knowing. Elaine paused, heartful. She turned off the screen, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. The darkness that once surrounded her had turned into space, not empty, but full of possibility. The Porters had forgotten to give her a gift that Christmas, but in the end, she had taken something far more valuable, her voice, her dignity, and her freedom, and once reclaimed, she knew she would never let them go again. The story didn't end with their fall. It began with her rise. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.